Yo, peace. That's optimal. When the coppers come, they bring an arsenal to keep us marginal. At all costs, yeah, they got the goal to fight back's not optional. See, the power lies with the capital. They tilt the scale, that's illegal. Every major CEO should go straight to jail and then rot there till they go burn in hell. Maybe that's overkill. If you judge, be judged, that's biblical. We're living in the days transitional, how the Mayans felt when they turned the wheel. That time we're living in, pivotal. Watch the government, they some criminals. With the GMO, watch the cancers grow with the fast food and pharmaceutical. It's cold as stone, but we're pyramids built with the cornerstone. We hold our own. New day dawn, script been flipped, what you smoking on? If you don't know, it's tyrannical, how they profit off keeping our prisons full. I know it's hard to stay knowledgeable cause they fear control so tactful, goddamn. When will we be free? But I'd rather die with my head held high than live life on my knees. I said, goddamn. When will we be free? But I'd rather live with my head held high than live life on my knees. And I don't know what it is that you say to it, but we've been resisting the system. That's what we've been doing. We won't let them take advantage of our workforce unit. Because as a people, if we dream it, we can bring it to fruition. Peace.
What up, though? Welcome to the Dope Friends podcast. This is Leon. This is the podcast where I link up with some dope friends who do dope things for the world. And today I'm joined by a really dope friend out here in Lake Merced, San Francisco, by the name of JPZ. Say what's up to the world, man.
JPZ.
How you feeling today, man?
I'm feeling really good.
Yeah.
It's a sunny day. We're here at the lake, Lake Merced, San Francisco.
You know, sunny days out here, it's kind of hard to come by, too. So, like, we're a little lucky right today.
That's true. Yeah. Hopefully more now, because foggy August is about done. So, hopefully,
It's climate change, man, because I remember growing up, I felt like it was just foggy all year long in San Francisco. So I feel like that might be something to do with climate change, but it's nice for the city, maybe not for the rest of the world, though. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, we get the best of it over here.
Yeah. So the concept of this podcast is, dope friends that do dope things for the world. So, I wanted to talk to you and, bring you onto this show because I know you do a lot of dope things, right?
Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. And I really am happy to be on Dope Friends. I'm really glad to consider myself a dope friend.
Yeah.
And that doing dope
not
things.
The other kind of dope person.
Right, not a dope fiend, but a dope friend.
Exactly. But, we fiending for dope, but, the different kind of dope.
Different dope.
I mean?
Oh, shout out to Different Dope on that note.
Yeah.
I also rep Different Dope, a collective, hip-hop collective out of San Jose. I'm actually the only person that's not in San Jose.
Dang.
Out of Different Dope.
That's dope, man, because it sounds like, from the time I've known you, you've always been a man of many hats, right? Yep. But if you were to tell the world that maybe don't know who you are,
for sure.
Kind of like a short biography, maybe like your business card or your LinkedIn profile at a glance.
Yeah.
How would you describe who you are and what you do?
For sure. Well, yeah, I identify as 5 things: an event producer, a comedian, a DJ, an MC, and a skateboarder. And those are my 5 things that I do.
Dang, that's what's up. What are some of the events that you're doing as of late?
So event-wise, I work 9 to 5 doing events. That's my thing. I work at San Francisco State University. So it's pretty cool. We brought T-Pain out, so we do some bigger events, bring some cool people out. So I feel pretty blessed that that's my 9 to 5. I could do kind of something in line with my passion, but outside of that, which is the more important stuff, right? MC, part of Gringo Latino, which is a project on Spotify you can check out. We're about to drop Gringo Latino 2, our second project as a group, and then I got my solo music, JPZ, and then I do comics, as well as DJ around town. I got first and third Thursdays at Ghost Town Brewery in Oakland, and then second Thursdays at Legionnaire. I throw an astrology-based party, and then I'm on air on KPOO radio every second Sunday.
Right, and that's a local radio station.
Yeah,
out
yeah,
here, right?
89.5 San Francisco, historic radio station. First black-owned radio station this side of the Mississippi. Also, very important radio station for West Coast hip-hop, because a lot of people weren't bringing out hip-hop back in the 80s on the West Coast.
Right, right.
So they were one of the first ones that started bringing out, DJ Red Alert and, just some other heavy hitters.
Mm-hmm. And you're a resident DJ there every Sunday or every other Sunday?
Every second Sunday.
Every
yeah.
second Sunday.
Yeah. So
okay.
Hip Hop for Change radio show takes place every Sunday, and then I host it every second Sunday.
So how does it feel to be kind of part of that history, right?
It's an honor. It feels great. It's so cool. I like being first a guest, and just looking around the studio, just seeing all the artists that have come through and signed things. Recently, they put a little booklet that chronicles the history, which is pretty interesting. Tupac was definitely there in the studio multiple times, and Too Short, yeah,
just legends,
just legends, man. So it's
in and out of the Bay Area.
Yeah, and so it's cool, and it's mostly there's a lot of jazz and a lot of blues, a gospel show that I listen to on Sunday mornings, and so yeah, I feel like I get my cultural enrichment a lot just
right.
from being part of that community.
That's really dope. And I know like KPO, it kind of has this more like, Afrocentric kind of like perspectives and things like that. So what are some of the things that you like to talk about when you're on air?
Specifically, I mean, hip hop, right? Because the specific show, so I'm pretty limited, not limited, but the show is specifically local hip hop. Right. So I can only play local hip hop. So the conversations mostly revolve around supporting local artists and then kind of differentiating, and getting into some of the things, like what's the difference between, say, your Mr. Fab and Leon De La Sco, or like, some of like, like some folks that have like kind of made it, or like, so like SOB and, oh shoot, I forgot their name. SOB and
XRBE.
XRBE.
You're talking about the same, but you're comparing them with somebody. Who are you comparing them to?
Well, I'm just comparing them as like a group that has reached commercial success, that's from the Bay Area, to Bay Area like our peers that are like Unlearn the World, right? Who's makes very good music, but doesn't enjoy that commercial success. Right. And then in between that would be like a Mr. Fab, right? Which has got underground success and is like a legend, but doesn't have like mainstream success, right? Like around the world per se. And just kind of talk about like what different messages are in each of those categories, right? Because on the underground, like our friends could talk about a lot of radical stuff, whereas you won't hear that on the commercial end. Then you got like your Mr. Fab or like E40 who will spit some, like truth, like spit some like real gems,
right?
But could never put something so radical on like a big commercial project.
And that's interesting because I feel like that's such an age-old debate when it comes to hip-hop, right? These kind of distinctions between commercial and underground hip-hop, and like a lot of times people will kind of draw these like polarizations around what's real hip-hop and what's fake hip-hop, fake meaning, I guess, sellout hip-hop, quote-unquote, what have you. But I feel like what's so interesting, especially in the Bay Area, is those lines are constantly blurred, right?
Yeah.
Because things that blow up in the Bay Area that reach commercial success usually have underground success first. And it doesn't always have to do that much with subject matter per se, right? It's really, there's like a Bay Area kind of mythology and kind of an underground economy, right? Like a creative economy kind of in spite these larger institutions, at play, right? Like even like there's a lot of people that give like a lot of critique to like KMEL, right? But then historically they were putting on underground artists, right?
Right.
But would you say?
But isn't that sort of the same thing that we're saying? I mean, it's like once you kind of reach like a larger success, or I guess that's a specific instance because we're talking about the, FCC and like larger corporations taking KMEL over, and different rules being put in place, policies changing that dictate that. But yeah, it just seems the more success you reach, the less you can do things like, for instance, KMEL used to put on a lot of local artists, and now I think they have one thing that they do that puts on local artists.
Right.
But it's
So
like
do
a
you think-
competition or something.
Do you think like subject matter has a lot to do with the kinds of success a given hip hop artist is able to reach?
Well, I think that's pretty obvious historically, right? I mean, like if you look at artists that, I mean, of course I'm biased because I like these artists, but looking at like Boots Riley and the Coup, right? That he's been around for so long, and he's got great music, right?
Right.
But his message is just uncompromising, and I think that's the reason why he's not a household name.
What do you think there are certain strategies, or is there a formula for success in the entertainment industry, or in and out the commercial and underground realm for hip hop? At least out of the Bay Area.
If I knew it, I would be successful.
What do you think are some of the things you have to do in order to, I guess, make a living out of hip hop, right?
Be marketable
usually the dream
and work hard to sell yourself, I think, are the two biggest things, right? If I really have the philosophy that if you have a vision and you work tirelessly towards that vision, you will be successful, period. It's just a matter of time. And that theory hasn't really been put to the test by me personally, because there's still a lot of time. But then also, things like self-doubt will get in the way and limit my creative output for a time, or limit my work output for a time, so that I'm not actually working as much towards that end goal, and so it takes longer to get there. But I think people that just don't stop whatever their vision is, I think they always reach success. That's what I've learned by watching YouTube videos.
That's very interesting to me, because I want to agree with you, but I also see a lot of struggling artists, right? Like most of the artists that I'm like good friends with, yourself included, right, are they do music probably full time, but also pick on other jobs and stuff like that, other side hustles or other maybe bases or other full time jobs. Do you think your career in event planning, does that help you in music or your other performing arts?
I don't think that it helps my creative output, but what it does do is, my goal was never actually to make it as a successful artist. That's more my goal now, but I'm still kind of defining what that art looks like, what that art is, because I just never thought of myself as an MC only, or that I could be a successful MC rapper, the type that we see on TV. Maybe that's because I just never saw myself in that position. Like, now there's a lot more like white rappers that are come out that kind of look like me that are seeing success, but I also don't really like them for the most part.
Do you identify as white?
For me it's tough because I'm mixed, right? So I typically don't identify as white, but I have to identify as what people identify me as, right? Like I can't look in the mirror and say I'm not white when obviously I know what I look like.
Because there's certain like privileges that you hold.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I mean, my whole family background is one of just very interesting privileges, because my white grandparents, my white side came from Mexico, but they were able to cross the border. My grandmother was born in Mexico. She's white, and she was able to cross the border illegally just because she was white. My grandfather was technically born in the United States, but didn't know that because he was abandoned in Mexico at like age 5. So he didn't know that until later in life. So when he was crossing the border, he thought he was doing it illegally until he found out that it was legal. And then so once he found out that he was legally able to be in the United States, all he had to do was learn the English phrase. He didn't speak English at that time. He just learned the English phrase, "We're American." And that's how he got my grandmother and my uncles and aunts at the time to get in. My father was the first one born on the American side. My father was the quote-unquote anchor baby.
That is definitely like a prime example of white privilege, right?
It is.
To be able to just to say that I'm American and nobody questioned that, right?
Right, and that's why I say it's very complicated, because it is exactly what white privilege is, but at the same time, like they were, dirt poor, right?
Right.
So it's like I wrote a song about it called White Privilege. Check it out. It's with What's Real, right? What's Real and Unlearn the World. I think it's a good track. But
What's
yeah,
the song about? I mean, other than white privilege, how are you talking about it
I mean,
in
I
that song?
specifically just say that exact story. I just say like how complicated. Like it's just the story of my grandfather Stanley, how he got to America, and people would say like, hey, we don't want Mexicans in our neighborhood, and have a whole petition to kick him out until they saw him and saw that he was white, and they said, oh well, you're not that bad. So it's like, it's just like, it's this weird like form of like racism and then white privilege at the same time, to where you're an outsider and you're from Mexico, so you're not allowed to be here, but then we're racist and you're white, so I guess it's okay. And it's just like that whole like conflict. I don't know. It's it's part of my history, so I find it very fascinating, and I kind of live in that space as well.
Right. But do you identify as white, or do you identify as something else culturally?
I guess I would have to say I identify as American culturally, and I don't really know how to define that more than that, except that it does involve, all of the racial history that our country has.
Right. I mean, I feel like this is such a fascinating story, right? And it's really beautiful and powerful that you're expressing it, especially because, I mean, I personally know a lot of white passing people of color, right? And a lot of times it's because they're not white, they're kind of ignore their privileges, like, what I'm saying, that coincide with the colorisms and things like that. So to be a mixed person in the U.S., I feel like that is such like an interesting story, right? Like, do you feel like you're embraced by other white people? Do you feel like you're embraced by other mixed people or different people of color?
So I definitely feel more camaraderie and like enjoy myself more just around mixed people or people of color that accept me, because white people are racist. And so because I am white, right, or white passing or what have you, inevitably something will come up that makes me uncomfortable, right? Inevitably someone will say, because my abuela is from Guatemala. Right, so someone will say like, oh, I went to Guatemala and it was like a fun vacation, or they don't or talk crap about Central America because it's or like I did missionary work there and I helped them and it made me feel good, like,
right,
or say something more overt, which is just like, oh, I don't like beaners or something like that, like they're like,
or just wear a MAGA hat,
right? Like there's so many instances where it pops up either
like a microaggression that like I don't know, I even don't know myself how to feel about it, right? Like should I take that as a microaggression, should I not? Like it doesn't affect me like it affects other people, but I still heard it and know that it would affect one of my family members if they were sitting next to me, right? So it's like, so what do you do in those instances? Do you have like an example or a story of something like that that's happened to you?
Oh, I should for a podcast, shouldn't I?
This is all off the top of the dome. This is how real it is, for Dope Friends. You don't see no notes or nothing like that here, because I'm literally linking up with friends, so figure.
Yeah, we thought we were gonna be talking about something totally different.
You know what I'm saying?
And then this is really interesting.
And we didn't think we was be sipping on this apple juice here in this Crown Royal bag.
Right. Yeah, we've got bottles of non-alcoholic.
But sponsor me. So
sponsor me.
Yeah.
I don't really have any stories of. I mean, it would take me a while to think of something off top that was like when that happened. I just like mostly everything's from high school. Oh, I can tell you one specific story.
Cool.
From high school is when there was a big brawl at the so I went to high school at in rural Oregon, very low income, Phoenix, Oregon, hick school. We couldn't afford. My senior year didn't have yearbooks. That's how poor the school was. They said they couldn't afford yearbooks my senior year.
They were like, you don't want to remember this school anyway.
Yeah, it was a joke. It really was a joke of a school. But so one year, and so there's a trailer park like not far from school. And it was very much like the Mexicans versus the white folks on that trailer park, and there was a big brawl amongst the women. So all the Latino girls and all the white girls got in a huge fight, and it was like it was like high school movie type of shit where in class the girl that I was not really dating, but she was trying to date me and whatever high school stuff.
Sounds like a different story.
Yeah, it's a totally different story. But anyway, she was like, "Oh, you coming to the fight? You know, it's gonna be this big fight. Like, you gotta come."
It's like an event, huh? I mean,
Right,
I remember
yeah,
high
it was
school.
like-
this
yeah,
is before
it was
World
like-
Star,
Yeah,
where
it was
like
before-
World
yeah,
Star
it was like
culture
everyone
still
was
exists.
gonna come and show up to this big fight because everyone knew it was going down.
It's gonna be
And
spectacular.
it was like women from the trailer park all fighting each other. So how could you miss that, right? It was really exciting. And I just remember being like, people assuming like, oh, you're gonna like, yeah, like let's go, white folks. We're gonna beat all these Mexican chicks. I'm just like, yeah, like I'm not really gonna do that. I feel that's weird that you want me to do that. And they're like, why?
Because they just saw you as white.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm kind of, I have family that's Guatemalan, and you know, my grandparents came from Mexico, and so I'm just kind of like not really sure where I fit in here.
Mm-hmm.
And that like, kind of like, I just remember seeing like the blank stare of her face, being like, I don't get it. Like you should root for us.
Right.
It's just like,
right.
who's you know, it's like and at the time I was very underdeveloped as far as my like racial awareness, so like I didn't have anything to respond with, and it just kind of like sat there. But that moment sat with me and really actually helped create a lot of my identity, and what we were talking about it earlier, because then that's when I first understood, like, I'm not white. Like, even though I appear white, I'm not, because white people think that I am on their side and don't understand like the nuances and my perspective. So
that you're going to be automatically complicit into their racism.
Yeah. And so that's something that's really weird, but that instance isn't, you know, like, that's the one I remember because it was like defining for me, but that has happened a lot where people will just say, you know, microaggressions, whatever, and it's just like, oh, it's because you don't know. If I was tanned more, or you know, was like a person of color that people could see, you would not have made that statement in front of me. Period.
Right.
Like, you wouldn't have done that. So I feel like a lot of times I'm like a POC spy in some ways. You know, you'd be like, oh,
that's such a white thing to say.
Like,
I was a spy.
Right. It is. It totally is. But yeah, like, there's a lot of times where I feel like talking to my friends, I'm just like, oh, you shouldn't be friends with them because they're like actually racist, but they don't really know it. But I heard them say racist shit to me. Yeah. Because they don't.
Well, I mean, racists typically don't think that they're racist, right? Which is, I mean, it's such an interesting story because growing up in Frisco here, I feel like in my generation was kind of the last like generation of the really like overt gangbanging era. So like all the schools, like, because Frisco is really like small, like it's pretty, like the schools I went to were pretty diverse, right? So like my classrooms were all different folks of color, but after school, there'll be those rumbles. Those big fights where like this gang is fighting this gang, and you're automatically grouped by your race. Right. So if you're in that vicinity, you're just expected to fight for like your race and stuff like that. And it's weird because you're fighting people that you're cool with in class, but you have to fight each other. You know what I mean?
Crazy.
Like, and that's kind of like this like kind of like forgotten like Frisco history. You know what I mean? Or like maybe not forgotten, but like, you know, definitely like lesser known, lesser told kind of history of Frisco. But to me, that was kind of how I found the importance of hip hop. Because like hip hop was that common language that allowed me to make friends in these classrooms where after school we were gonna fight. You know what I'm saying? And kind of complicated like this idea of like, why are we fighting? You know what I mean? Like kind of like make you second guess it a little bit more. And I would imagine that, you know what I mean, being a mixed person, like, you know what I mean, like what would that even be like? You know what I mean? And I want to kind of like find this way to really smoothly segue this into asking you, like, how did you find hip hop? But you know, it didn't work that well. But you know, so how did you find hip hop? You know?
Yeah, there was a couple of instances is like I look back and think like these are the defining moments where I identify as hip hop.
Because you know, you're talking about, you know what I mean, white culture and Mexican or Chicano culture, right? Which is not necessarily hip hop culture, right? Hip hop is black culture, right?
For
so
sure.
like, how did that come about?
Honestly, it was Public Enemy.
All right.
and I, you know, like,
That's a
I
good
don't
place
know.
to start.
You know, I'm gonna bust myself open on your podcast, and say that like and I don't know what it was. I think largely it was the fact that I didn't know what to identify with being mixed. The where like radical blackness, like Black Panthers, and Public Enemy. And like that, like just really spoke to me. Like I remember being like a big fan of the Black Panthers before I really understood, like what race is. Period. I mean, my dad played, you know, played a blues harmonica. So I remember being taught, you know, like my first my first memory of music is black musicians, right? Stevie Wonder raised me. You know, I went to see my dad perform, you know, with blues bands, and so that was something that like always stuck with me as far as like when I first found out that racism was a thing, I was like, why? Don't you know black people make the best music? Like, what are you talking about? You know, like that was
they
like
probably didn't know because they listened to the people that culturally appropriated. You know,
right? It was just that was like literally my first thought when I first heard anyone be racist. I was like, but I just went to a party. It was awesome. Like, what are you talking about? But so when I first heard Public Enemy through Thrasher, Skate, and Destroy the video game, that introduced me to all the old school hip hop, and then through that is what really old school hip hop is what got me into hip hop. And it was that game that had the soundtrack that was all old school hip hop, EPMD, and just a number of others, you know, Gangstar, just all these like, you know, hard hitting, like when you think of like real hip hop, like that's what it was.
Right. So it was rap though, in particular, like political rap.
Yeah.
So
rap.
when did you start rapping? Was that the first element of hip hop you picked up, or how did you get into it? Like, how did you start becoming a practitioner of it, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely, for me, it's like blurred lines because I'm still not sure right now if I'm technically like accepted in hip hop, right? Like I know I am with all my friends, but like if I were to go outside that circle, like I've been in cyphers in New York, and I wasn't accepted, you know? Like I was a fucking, who the fuck was I? Like I first showed up to this cypher wearing flip-flops because I didn't know it was a cypher, right? I was just walking down the street in the summertime.
Why are you wearing flip-flops in New York City, dude?
Because it's hot, dude. It's hot in the summer, man. I can wear socks in that humidity. You kidding me? Fucking sweaty feet and shit.
That's a pretty white attire. I'll put it that way.
Well, I'll put it that way. And that's what the dude said. That's what the host said. He was just like, he basically laughed at me when I walked in and said I was gonna rap.
Where'd you go? What was the name of the venue?
Oh man, I totally forget.
Is it what's it called? The New Aurican or something like that?
This is in 2000. This is 8 years ago, and I have no memory of it. It was in Manhattan. It was in Manhattan. It was a hole in the wall that was like right by.
You couldn't get accepted in Manhattan? A white man couldn't get accepted in Manhattan?
I mean, yeah. I don't know. It was pretty funny, man.
I don't mean to clown you.
Hey, as long as it's entertaining for the listeners, man, that's all I care about.
I hope so.
But yeah.
So what happened then? You went up there like, hey, I'm gonna rap. And you're like, you gonna rap? And you had your Eminem moment, like, yo, this is my one shot. I gotta do this. You know what I mean?
It wasn't that epic because I first came in, like I said, off the street and just did it, and like no one cared, right? Like just no one gave a shit. All right, thanks for like doing your thing. Get the fuck out of here. And then I just kept coming back, and that's when they were like, oh, you're not just a tourist. Well, I mean, I was a tourist, obviously, but I was living there for like over a month, right? So, you know, they kind of were like, okay, like you're not just this dude walking in. You like are actually like part of, you know, you're here for a while at least, to where you keep coming back for like every week for multiple weeks, and then so it wasn't. I don't think it was acceptance as much as it was tolerance.
Okay.
And every other MC was black and talking about like very typical hip, like money, chains, cars. Okay. Right? Like that was pretty much every other song. It was very commercial. It was geared towards commercial success. In fact, the owner or the host specifically would talk about that. He's like, this is a place to get seen for commercial success. He brought the president of Def Jam South out to like see one of these open mics. So it was definitely like a place where you want to be, like show your commercial success, and I just never had that, and I think that was like a good learning experience for me to kind of understand what that means. And he definitely, you know, without saying so many words to me, made it clear that he was talking about me when he said stuff like, some people are never going to make it here like commercially successful, and there's like a, you know, almost like a training for that, almost like a specific criteria you want to hit if you want to do that, and here's a good place to do that, and I can help you, or you can just do your own thing and never be successful. Right. Not in so many words, but I really had that feeling when he was talking.
Well, I think it just goes back to what we were talking about like earlier in the beginning of the show,
Right.
where it's kind of like hip hop isn't necessarily just one thing, right? Like there's definitely like a lot of different avenues for hip hop, and especially like for commercial success through hip hop.
Yeah.
It seems very like formulaic and very like specific, right? So it does make sense that like, you know what I mean? If you're gonna come with some like underground style, right, in a place that's really about I'm trying to get A&R to notice me. You know what I mean? It's going to be harder for that space to accept you, right? But how do you feel that it's been different here in the Bay Area then? Because I know the Bay Area has a lot of space for both. You know what I mean? And there's like I would argue that like, you know, even the most commercial artists that came out of the Bay Area, they can hang in the underground scene as well. Like, you know, they're welcomed. You know what I mean? In the underground scene, just like they're welcomed in you know, anywhere in the Bay. You know what I mean? So how is that different for you? What do you think?
Well, I just think it's very much more accepting of eccentricity, like, and it's not like other places. I feel is more, and this is obviously like changing, you know, throughout time. It's all evolving. So like these memories are now about 10 years old, and it could have changed in the places that I'm referring to.
Right.
But at the same time, here, it doesn't seem so clicked up, right? Where like a lot of other places are like, oh, if you're this, like that's kind of what you are, and you hang with those people, and that's kind of what you do. Whereas I never felt that here. Like when I first moved to Oakland in 2010, it was just like, and this is West Oakland. It was still pretty, like it was definitely, you know, like the artist gentrification wave, but that's what I really liked. It was still like Wild Wild West. Like there was still a lot of just like fucking ridiculous shit going on in the streets, and no one gave a fuck, and that's what attracted me to it. But on that same note, like it was everybody, right? It wasn't just like, oh, those people look like that, that's what they do. It was just like, okay, that person from that crew hangs equally as well with the punks, and you know the punks hang equally well with, you know, these, you know, school artist types, right? The academic art type of people, and they hang just equally as well with, you know, whatever. And so it was just like, I just saw like all this different, like people can be their own eccentricity. They can have their own eccentricities. They can be like themselves, however weird that kind of gets.
Do you think that gets complicated though, because you said you've been here since 2010, right?
Yeah.
So throughout that time, you've seen a lot of gentrification,
Correct.
a lot of changes, like rapid states of gentrification, and a lot of people that gentrify locals also do art, also rap, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, how does that? How do you feel about that as somebody that's not local to here, but you know you definitely have planted some seeds here, roots here, right? In the time that you've here as an events organizer, as somebody that hosts a hip hop radio show,
Right.
right? It's somebody that throws quote unquote, for lack of a better word, conscious hip hop shows, right?
Right.
It's like what are your thoughts on that?
You just gotta ask like really good questions that are deep, huh?
My bad. Let's talk about the weather.
Because the honest answer, as I pause to look at all the booties go by, you can see that in the video. A lot of booties just ran by.
Man, check yourself, bro, before you wreck yourself.
Not to objectify
but
women,
you are.
but I am currently right now.
Your white side is really showing for this show.
It really is. It really is. I don't know what to tell you.
So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on these kind of like just the way that the hip hop scene must have changed throughout the time that you've been here?
So that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, like I'm busting myself out because how I feel about it is I'm angry that is more common, to where I'm not the only one, because I'm not, like, I am philosophically. It goes back to being in like two spaces at once, right? Like being mixed, and then also being like a gentrifier that's anti-gentrification. Like, how do you do that? Like, I feel like I'm often in these spaces where it's contradictory. And so how I feel about it is that I used to kind of have more of my own lane, right? Like, because I was accepted and fighting with a lot of locals, you know, on these subjects. And then now that so many more people have joined that, well, now I'm not that is unique anymore, right? Now there's a bunch of more people, and the more people that show up, the more problematic things are easier to spot, right? Because the more people you have, you can kind of start to notice more patterns that are
Problematic things like what?
I mean, shit. What white folks doing in POC spaces? Something problematic will pop up, right? But if I'm the only person like that's kind of in that space, it's easier, right? Like it's harder for people to see that, or it's easier for me to blend in. But the more people that come in, then I get lumped in with them. Does that make sense?
Got you.
So yeah, and this is like very just like, that's why I said I'm busting myself out, because this is like very just like selfish, like egotistical thinking.
So how does that kind of manifest, I guess, in your events organizing, right? Because in, the concept for the podcast is dope things for the world, right? So I know you put in a lot of work in organizing shows that are about arts-based activism or hip-hop-based activism, specifically, right? So what are some of the morals and ethics, or I guess what is the process that goes into organizing like a show? You know what I mean? Whether it be for Hip Hop for Change or otherwise, right?
Well, my process has always been, not dissimilar to this podcast. Is dope friends doing dope things? Bring that platform. Make sure that there is that platform for them to do what they do, because that was what got me into it in the first place. Is I saw all this talent around me, and none of them were able to get it beyond their little small circle. So it's like, how do I do that? Because that's what I want. I want these people. I want you to be successful. I want so and so to be successful. I want all these artists that I see this great creativity and potential to be realized and to turn into people's success stories. So it's really easy for me to put a show together, because it's just like, oh, you're dope, you're dope, you're dope. What you do all kind of goes well together. Let's put a show, and we'll make the most popular one the headliner, and we'll try to bring some art in there that goes along with it, and that'll just help. And if you guys don't know each other, you'll get to know each other, so they can form alliances and do other creative collaborations. And that's just the philosophy, is that provide a platform for all the talent that I see to get seen by other people.
That's dope, man. And how, I guess, what is the kind of cultural or social impact do you hope to make from throwing these shows? What is something that you want to happen, or maybe that you've seen happen firsthand? You know what I mean?
Oh man, the most beautiful story. I mean, and I can't take credit for anyone's success, but I was, the first show that Jada did was a show that I threw. Right?
Okay.
So that was her first time performing.
Who's Jada, for folks that don't know?
Jada, part of Tattoo Vision, amazing MC in Oakland, and just phenomenal. Super young. I think she's oh shoot, I don't know how old she is. 20? I think she's 20 now. Maybe she just turned 20. Something like that. She's 19, 20. So I first met her, I think, when she was 17, maybe 18, but just still in high school, right? She was still a high school student, and now she hosts things at Impact Hub. She's talking to the two guys. Do you know the two guys that just did that movie Blind Spotting?
No, I haven't watched it yet. I know I feel super embarrassed that I didn't watch it yet.
David and I forget the other guy's name. But anyway, so she recently did a show with them. So she has a career trajectory.
Right.
Right now, she is in position to have a great career in the music arts, right? And the first show she ever did was a show that I threw, and I didn't know that until she told me that. So I've always felt super blessed that that I was a part of that. And like I said,
what show was it? What was the event?
I have no idea. I just remember because I totally didn't know that, right? And she told me a year or so ago. She was like, "Oh, that was the first time I ever performed." And I was like, "Wait, what?" Are you telling me I had I was integral to your stardom? That's awesome. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I am doing something dope for the world.
And she's local too, right? She's from Oakland.
Not originally. Their family's from the Midwest originally, but they came over super young. As far as I know, I might be getting the details wrong. I'm not sure.
Right.
Tattoo Vision, check it out.
But
They're
like,
great.
it's just like kind of speaks to the importance of like, you know, local, especially folks of color's voices, right? Like having that platform for it in an increasingly gentrified, I mean, city of San Francisco for sure, but the entire Bay Area is kind of like the culture has changed so much. And I would argue that a lot of the stuff that I grew up with, a lot of like folks of color are being marginalized even more, like at a very rapid rate. So like it kind of says that, do you think that speaks to the importance of your work?
Definitely. Definitely. And I think it's going to get harder as time goes on, and the lines are going to get blurred more. And specifically, I'm talking about in Oakland on Telegraph, where the First Friday goes down. My friend Molly, who is a radical activist, she has a space, the Alan Bluford Center, named after Alan Bluford, who was murdered by OPD about 5 years ago. And so I've worked closely with her in that space, and I think that space is one of the most important things around me because I don't live too far from it. And in an area that is there's about 20 new apartment complexes going up right now. There's probably a new business, you know, that serves the gentrifying community popping up, you know, every month almost, it seems. You know, it's so new, and the money coming in is so new, and the people coming in are so new that it's pushing out even what I knew, you know, 5 to 8 years ago, right? Like, because it's crazy. You shouldn't be able to see gentrification happen that fast. So that's why it's not even gentrification, right? It's hyper gentrification. It's way beyond just with the definition of gentrification. It's got to be classified as something else because it is ridiculous. It's happening so fast, and that space is so important because it's the last one like it on that street. It's the last one that you can actually hold for the people that it's meant to serve. Where there's a lot of, you know, community spaces, but because the area is being so rapidly gentrifying, it's really hard to tell, you know, and we don't want to draw a line. I mean, it's hard to draw a line, right? You can't just say you're white, don't come in, right? You know, like it's hard to judge a person's character when you don't know them. Right. And so, like, how do you know, what was it Malcolm X who said, right? Like it's the liberal whites that are the biggest problem. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but yeah. So with that being said, it's like, how do you draw these lines? And I don't think you can, but I know that a lot of community spaces, even though they mean well, end up serving that population, which I guess I'm included in.
Was it Malcolm X that said that? I feel like that could have been MLK.
Was it MLK?
I don't know, because like
I was literally just asked that question and someone told me it was Malcolm X.
Oh shit, I'm not sure because I know Malcolm. I know MLK said radical things like that. That's conveniently erased during MLK Day. Right. Like the things that he said about liberal whites, like was kind of in the common lexicon, so to speak, right? I mean, we have the internet, so why not just look it up?
I was gonna do that and try to not do it on the air so that people didn't think that, so I could.
We're on
like
camera too.
Going on.
So yeah,
no, we're not on camera.
This is a video podcast available on YouTube and on all streaming platforms. So I mean, hopefully, you know what I mean. Hopefully, this. I mean, I don't foresee a problem, but I mean, it is very interesting because it is very hard to draw that line, because you spoke about First Fridays. For folks that don't know about First Fridays, it's like an event that happens in Oakland the first Friday of every month, right? And it's a big event, right? A lot of people come out for it. A lot of locals have booths and stuff like that. But it's also like a big tourist attraction, right? Because from my understanding of it, correct me if I'm wrong, it started as like a really small group of anti-gentrification activists trying to throw a community event. Was that the case? Are you familiar with the history?
A little bit, and I don't know if it was specifically like an anti-gentrification event, but I know it was specifically for the locals to like to celebrate local culture and to, you know, monetize it and celebrate their art, you know, where like, hey, we do awesome things and we do dope things, and you know, let's just take over this, you know, like part of the street and sell our stuff and have it be a fun community event, right? Which as too often happens, one piece of violence popped off, they shut it down so the event couldn't happen, and then reopened it as a citywide, monetized event where the city makes the money.
And they rebranded it.
And rebrand it.
How's it branded now, do you think? Or how's it advertised?
Well, specifically that neighborhood, Kono, so I know it's like Koreatown Northgate, was like the name that I remember. So now it's called Kono. So that's just kind of another, not different than like Soho or like whatever, like rebranding different neighborhoods in like a hip way.
Right, like they're them trying to change the TL, the Tenderloin,
the TL
into Little Saigon or something like that.
Oh,
right?
Little Saigon, yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to rebrand it as like kind of like an ethnic, like foodie spot. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Cause I've even heard the trendy loin.
Oh yeah, yeah.
How disgusting is that?
Yeah. The L's has a bad rep, but I grew up really hanging out in the L's a lot. But
yeah.
That's on a side conversation.
That's a
right?
different episode.
Yeah.
So it's I've seen the plans. The plans are to make it just like the perfect place to take your stroller on a nice day to go shopping.
Right.
Is the plans to turn it into a strip mall, more or less. And
just more like a hub for consumption, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's like that's kind of the line between, I guess, like radicalism or like things about social justice versus things about whiteness, for lack of a better word, right? Because it becomes a space for whiteness when it becomes reduced to a space for consumption, right? Where it's no longer like the social movements behind the products or whatever gets kind of depoliticized, right? It just becomes like a fun thing to do. But I would say that First Fridays, in my opinion, is still really dope. You know what I mean? There's still like a lot of local booths. A lot of locals come out of there, come out to hang out there. It's like, you know what I mean? It's largely people of color.
Definitely.
Right? Like, would you agree, disagree? Like,
No, I agree with that. And it still has those elements, but it changes the elements too, right? Because if you have an Afrocentric market and, a lot of like people come to that to purchase things from it, right? Does it not become commodified, right? Is blackness not commodified in that way, and so like that's one of the pitfalls of capitalism is how do you discern your support for something versus commodifying that thing.
Right.
Because
I think the liberal perspective is that my dollars makes all the change happen, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm voting with my dollars, right? Which, you know what I mean? There's some truth to that, but it's kind of a limited truth, right?
And you'll hear it when people talk, and like I said, I'm not really any different, but you'll hear people say things like, oh, like I got these like really cool handmade earrings from like this black woman in Oakland, right? Like that's a cool point that she just got, or that's she's one of the good ones because she did that, right? And I don't know, like is that could be totally well-meaning, and her heart could be totally pure, and that could be a great thing that she is doing and part of many great things that she's doing, or it could be just like
a fetish,
right?
For
exactly.
social justice aesthetics.
Yeah, and it's like, so where like and I cannot tell, I cannot judge another person, but when all of that's happening so often, it just makes me uncomfortable because I can't tell.
I mean, I think it's really like it's kind of reminds me of like the no hate campaigns, right? Like it was like those for-profit organizations kind of taking social justice with slogans and making lots of money from it, right? Do you think that in ways kind of like neutralizes or waters down or dilutes, or does it do anything to larger social justice movements?
I mean, I struggle. I don't think there's any place in capitalism for a social justice movement.
Can you say more?
Not really, as I'm formulating these thoughts. I mean, this is a pretty complex subject, and I don't have the
well, I mean, just what are your
academic
thoughts?
background to be able to like verbalize it in a way that I think is satisfactory. But
You're using a lot of white words again.
I'm trying to really. That's
Satisfactory. I do not have to answer that.
I'm trying to try my best, man. I'm trying to be articulate.
Yeah.
I just because every movement will be commodified, right? You look at Che Guevara.
Mm-hmm.
He is now a shirt at Hot Topic. You know what I mean?
For
Like,
real?
yeah. You've seen the Che shirts.
I haven't
They're
seen him at Hot Topic.
Well,
though.
I mean, okay, that's a stand-in for whatever store.
no,
You know what I
what you're
mean?
saying.
Like they're sold in.
Sponsor me, Hot Topic.
They're sold in stores that don't give a shit about, what he stood for, or and so I think capitalism will always commodify any movement, because anything that is possible to make a dollar off of,
Mhm.
it will be turned into a dollar generating machine.
Right.
So it doesn't matter how pure the original concept is and how revolutionary it is. In the context of capitalism, it will be sold, and if it's sold for enough for it to gain the interest of people that do big business, they will just keep watering it down so it sells more and more and more and more.
Right.
Until there's no message left.
But it's got to be complicated, especially because you are an events organizer, right?
Yeah.
So like the point is to get artists paid.
Yes.
Right. Like, or at least that's one of the goals. Maybe not. That's not the
that's
point.
my goal.
Right. That's one of the main goals that needs to. Because I mean, especially because we're lacking in platforms, because there's a monopoly over platforms, right?
Mhm.
Top 40 is literally the same 10 artists,
Right.
or the same 10 songs, right? Played over and over and over. So that's how important it is. But at what point do you have to, I guess, kind of cater to what will sell, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, where's the line, right? What are the ethics for like finding ways to pay artists, even?
I mean,
how do you raise money to pay the artists?
So I've done multiple different things to raise money to pay artists. I've literally myself gone around at my event, saying donate, throw some money in the jar for the artists.
Now,
And-
but do you think that's a sustainable model? Like, does it work in your experience?
I mean, so first of all, my events that I throw personally are small,
Okay.
right? So
Are they better that way, you think? Like, because in my opinion, I feel like smaller things are like, if everybody actually drops like, $10, $20, like, whatever, they may be more successful. The bigger things where corporations take a huge cut from it, right? So, I mean, what are your thoughts?
well, I don't think a big corporation necessarily has to take a cut, right? So so for instance, if I were to, and this is what I kind of mean, and I don't even necessarily care anymore about any one of the things that I start being commodified and taken into that realm that I no longer like it, because
Mhm.
I'll be making money. And I've now like turned a switch to where I understand that I operate in capitalism no matter what,
Right.
right? Until we overthrow capitalism, I have to be in this game.
Right.
And if I'm going to be forced to play this game, I better fucking try to win,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what I start and the intentions behind it, if it gets successful, it will turn into something that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm okay with that now. Like, that took me a long time to be okay with, my art turning into something that I don't like.
Well,
just
I mean,
for
you have
money.
to be strategic, right? I think everybody makes these negotiations, especially because artists,
Yeah.
like, at least
But what
in
do
my
you
opinion,
want,
this is your baby, right?
What do you want? Do you want, $60,000 a year to live, as a, whatever middle class, you can afford to rent an apartment in the Bay Area?
You need
and
way more
raise
than
a
60
family?
grand to be, to be considered middle class in the Bay Area.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But if you're making $60,000 a year off your art, like,
Mhm.
that is a success, even though that's like mid-level, or like living in the Bay Area, right? Like, if I were to make $60,000 off purely my art, I'd be stoked. I'd be so happy, even though that only gets me so far where I live.
Mm-hmm.
But I would rather make $1 million, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I want to be very successful financially.
So what are some of the ways to make this money? Like, how do you go from that 60 to 100? You know
Well,
what I mean?
if
What
I
are some
knew
of the
that, I
things you
wouldn't be talking on your
That's cold, man.
I know that is cool. I didn't mean that. I would.
You're not
be,
a dope friend no more.
I just be talking to you wearing a fur coat. I don't know. Well, I don't know what people do.
Yeah,
I be doing
yeah.
whatever they do.
But then, I mean, we had this conversation off camera about like streaming revenue, right?
Yeah.
Because that is the thing that's like popping right now, right? Like a lot of people, especially because this is the tech capital, right, of the world, San Francisco, the Bay Area, where people often praise it as a space for innovation, and it kind of takes credit for the creative economy that we talked about that was underground earlier, but a lot of people praise it as a way that kind of streamlines the amount of revenue an artist can make because they get paid royalties per stream. But you beg to differ, right?
Yeah, Aloe Black had the most streamed song. I think it was last year, 2017, and I think he made like somewhere around. Someone can fact check this, but I think it was around like 10 to 15 grand that he made, and that was the most downloaded and streamed song that year. Right. So like you're telling me, if an artist blows up and has the biggest song, they stand to make 10 to 15 grand a year.
Right.
Like that's ridiculous, right? Like so that's what we were talking about before is like, does these platforms that are supposed to like prop an artist up, do they take away from, the end result?
Because then the artists, they don't get to set the prices.
Right.
It's automatic, right? And because it's streamable, it makes it so that people are less inclined to buy the artist at the price that the artist sets, right?
Right. So, and you have to hit like so Beyonce, for instance, she can sell her album in one place and not put it anywhere else, and she will get sales. But that's because she's already reached that level. You know what I mean? So like, I don't think if any other artists like, in our peer level did that, it would take a really like I don't think they would be successful. Like they have to kind of play the game to get their name out there, and then go through that process of bolstering those up to get to that level before they can name their price. And it didn't used to be that way, but I don't really like using phrases like it didn't used to be that way. It used to be because
makes you sound old.
Yeah, and evolution is part of it, right? Like everything's going to change. That's a given. That's how it should change. But there are great things, right? So like Quincy Jones said that the music industry is dead. Paraphrasing again, but what he meant by that is very positive, because it means the gatekeepers that used to be the decision makers on what we listen to are no longer the decision makers anymore, right? So it's opened the platform as far as anyone can get their music out there. But what hasn't happened yet is anyone can make money off of their art, right? We've been able to get fans from around the world, and you can turn that fame and all those fans and your following into money if you do it right. And that's actually what I think he meant, and what is so spectacular about this time that we're in is that if you are creative enough and smart enough on that business tip, you can turn your free product that's gotten popularity into your financial success.
Which is, I mean, that's very interesting that you say, though, because it makes me think, like, is it true that there's no longer gatekeepers, or have the gatekeepers just changed? Are there new gatekeepers, right? Because in order for you to get views, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems very formulaic, right? Especially in this day and age, in 2018, it seems like to get views, you have to be a spectacle, right? And you have to kind of, it's easier for people to share things when it's funny, right? When you're clowning, like when you are a caricature of yourself, and oftentimes these caricatures depend upon stereotypes, and depend upon a lot of kind of like problematic kind of themes. You know what I mean? That's not all it is, right? There are also like people that just are hella creative and are able to breach that ceiling, so to speak, right? But for the most part, it seems like it's kind of people are just riding trends, and that people will, in my opinion, it seems like people are becoming famous for less time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what is the way? What is the way to make a living, a respectable living, doing the things that you believe in art, right? What are your theories on that?
I mean, so to kind of go back to before answering that question, go back to what you were saying, like just right beforehand, is that yes, it has opened up the ground floor, and the gatekeepers have changed to where now there's more of them and they mean less, right? So the way I see it is technology will keep, now that technology has gotten to a certain point, and hopefully, this is just like a theory, but hopefully it will keep breaking down. So every time there becomes a gatekeeper, now like, okay, you have to be on Spotify, you have to be on Sound, you have to be on Bandcamp, whatever. So now those are the gatekeepers, right? Not the big industry. Now it's these streaming platforms, or these online platforms. But technology can find a way to break that down, right? So where it's not that anymore. Now it's whatever the next thing will be. Any person on their phone. I don't know what the next thing will be. But but there's that space that technologically you can get around any gatekeeper, and I believe that's true, and I can't wait to see how that turns into the next thing. But as far as that last question you asked me, which was what on how.
So then how? So if it's I guess the gatekeepers mean less now. So how do we? Yeah, what is your philosophy on
making
how
money
or how do you
art.
make a living? Right? How do you do the things that matter to you, that you believe in, that you believe is a dope thing to do for the world, right? What is your philosophy on that? How do you do it?
Well, I think for me personally, I had to come to grips with the fact that I do, operate within capitalism, because, like I said, for so long I tried to fight back against capitalism. And then once I hit my 30s, I was just like, I don't want to be poor anymore. So it was like, all right, I will concede a little bit, and now the goal is to be unattached to whatever I produce. That way, I can not have those same feelings when it gets commodified, right? When if I produce anything that is sellable, and then people, some person in a suit says, hey, if you tweak it like this, you can sell 1 million copies, or if you do this, we can sell you this way, instead of being like, no, I'm an artist and this is my art and I won't be compromised, I'm going to go back to my tiny apartment and struggle more. Like, no, like now I'm just like, I will make that concession, and that what was my baby had turned into a monster, but I'm okay with it. And that's something that I had to make. And whoever's listening and judging right now, I feel you, and judge away. Like, make your own.
That's your Latino side.
Right? Make your own judgments about me and do it the way you want to do it. But for me, what I found is, I can't compete with capitalism anymore. I can't compete. I have to join in, and now I will do whatever I can that is still my creative output, but just less attached to whatever that is, to where if it's possible to make a buck, then sure, let's make a buck. Let's not fucking be hungry anymore. Let's and then the more that can happen, right? Because a millionaire, whatever he did, or she, whatever that person did, or they, it's horrible. Whatever that person did to make that $1 million, not can be erased, right? But can be gone back on. Like, so, okay, maybe I sold my soul or whatever capacity to make this money. But now that I have this money, I have a platform that can do originally what I wanted. And that's my answer to capitalism, is I have to win in capitalism so I can create the things that necessitate, a different system.
Right. So you have the same end goal. It's just you're making certain compromises to reach it now.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
On that note, we did reach like about the hour mark. So like, do you want to plug some of the things that you're working on? Some of these things you're producing that you're selling out?
Definitely. Right. It's not. I will say my new philosophy in a slogan is "Fuck capitalism, give me money."
Okay.
which I think is funny.
It's not giving me Bitcoin. It's not giving me
It can be. You
cryptocurrency.
can give me Bitcoin. I would love that.
I'll accept all payment options.
Yeah, it does not
Your white side
matter.
is showing again.
It does not matter.
Yeah.
I'm out for it. But yeah, so I think I already mentioned most
So
of
I'm
my
gonna plug
plugs.
my Venmo right now.
JPZ. JPZ. That's JPZ. JAYPEEZY. JPZ.
Is that really your Venmo?
That's really my Venmo.
Do you want to plug your gram or whatever?
My
or anything?
Instagram is the letters JPZ _ JAYPEEZY. So JPZ.
Dope.
Both spellings.
Anything we should look out
Instagram.
for coming out in the future?
Gringo Latino 2 is coming out. That'll be on the producer Vladdy D-Box Bandcamp as well as Spotify. You can check out Gringo Latino, our first project, self-titled, on Spotify. Just look up Gringo Latino, and it'll pop up. I really check out the gram. That's gonna be kind of where I'm focusing a lot of my art now. Is my Instagram. Because I want to do more of my comics and get that off the ground. It's been in the back of my head for a really long time. So I really want to just get my thoughts out there and actually put pen to paper and get those comics out there, as well as just other art. I've been doing more caricatures and portraits type of thing. And that's really where I'm at, man. Music, events, the Legionnaires, second Thursdays. Check out kpoo.com or 89.5 if you're in the Bay. On Sundays from noon to 3 p.m. for the Hip Hop for Change radio show.
You play some of my music on there, right?
I do. I play Leon de la Sco.
Hey, so look out for that.
I definitely do.
For sure.
And thanks for having me on Dope Friends, doing dope things, man. Because you're super dope. If y'all don't know, Leon de la Sco, super dope.
Hey, I thank y'all for listening, man. Peace. Sorry, this is an intermission. We stay recording, but you know what I mean?
We're millennials, y'all. We're on our phone break.
Yeah.